Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of Nain's Shorts here in the den of the Wandering Ronin, whose address is beep 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 beep. No, I'm kidding. I'm not giving the address. That would be funny though. I wonder what would happen. But we're not gonna go there. But here we are once again, and before we start, this is the last week that we are raffling off this beautiful Klingon blade. So if you haven't bought your tickets, what have you been doing? Get them. They're only $5 and you can get this beautiful, beautiful blade made by our friend John Atkinson at Wolf's Den Armory. This dog wants to be in the video and is sniffing me for some reason. Hey, I was eating beef jerky. Leave me alone. And then she wants me to pet her. No. I'm in the middle of something. I thought you wanted me to pet you. Anyways, so this dog that is supposed to be a foster child is looking for a home. So if anybody wants a dog, whoever buys the most tickets will get this dog as well as a combo. Okay, Mel was looking at me like I can't do that. I'm sorry. I rescind that. I rescind that. Offer. We're not giving the dog away. But this blade is being raffled off next week. It's $5 a ticket. I'm a terrible martial artist. Not cool, dog. But back to the point. We are raffling off this beautiful blade from Wolf's Den Armory, and I also want to show off my newest toy made by John Atkinson. It's a matching set. I guess you can call it a short sword or a really big bowie and an average size bowie blade. But these are awesome. The balance is great. They feel so much fun, and I definitely recommend. And I do have to make a correction because I've been saying that blade is extremely sharp, but I got 2 points wrong on that after talking with John just a couple days ago. One, it's not as sharp as it could be, or at least up to his standard of sharpness. So it definitely can be sharper, and he can make dull things. So these are trainers, folks. I know they look menacing, but they are trainers. They're safe. And he just seems to be getting better at his craft every time I see him. So definitely check out Wolf's Den Armory on Facebook. I believe he has a website under the same name. Look him up. He has a bunch of really cool toys from canes to blades, live and trainers as well. Composite materials that you can just bang away and not worry about chipping or breaking in any way. So definitely a lot of stuff to choose from. So check him out, John Atkinson. Love you, brother. I really, really like these. And yes, I bought these because as soon as I saw them, I knew I had to have them. So now they're mine. I'm gonna really enjoy these. But now that we can move on from that, recently we've been having some classes primarily with the teens in our class, and they're smaller in stature, and we definitely have to cater to what they're capable of doing physically. Development takes time. You all know that. Exercise, the amount of effort and training that you put into it. But something that's going to be effective and useful to them now is really where we want to focus our training with these particular students. And we found ourselves in a situation where we're testing out some basic movements of being able to go from one side to the other and attack. But it's a static target. And as we went along, we changed the parameters. We added a person as a target. Then the person was moving. Then we added 2 moving targets. Then we added 2 attacking targets. And we were able to explore the fundamental ideas that were necessary for this smaller person to be able to perform within that scenario. And the conversation started about how the learning process works. We've mentioned before there are three key elements in every lesson from teacher to student. And that's first the instructor, knowing yourself, knowing who you are and how you convey information, knowing the lesson. What is it that's important for that particular lesson at that time, wherever that student is in their journey in the martial arts world. And third is knowing the student, knowing the audience, knowing what it is that they know already, what learning style they may have or difficulties that they may have in the way that they learn. And when you can start utilizing these three ideas, which you already do, those who are instructors, you already do this to a certain degree. But again, the things that are left unsaid, the things that are left unexplored, and that's all this idea really is how do we focus and really start tailoring and even emphasizing certain points so we can get it across better to the student. Because all the learning process is pretty much the same. What happens is when you're learning new material is your brain is taxed with information that it doesn't yet understand. So you almost have to force yourself to be there in that moment, taking in information, and then hopefully it reaches the brain with all the other information that it already has, and it starts making sense. Essentially, you're putting yourself in an uncomfortable situation before your brain actually understands what's going on. It's almost like the opposite. Normally we work on the idea that, the brain is meant to protect you, so you do things to, when you fall, you protect, or when you're in an uncomfortable situation, you get out of there, or you freeze up. There's so many instinctive reactions that we have already within us that we do. But now that I've said that, I'm sure some of the martial artists are already thinking, but yeah, some of those things, some of those reactions aren't always the best things to do. Like, for example, when you fall and you automatically put your hands out, that's not always the best thing to do, because now you have your arm completely extended, and when you fall, it's much easier to break something or twist something or dislocate something. That's why in arts like judo and jiu-jitsu, they teach you ways to fall, how to minimize impact and almost roll into it. So you're not fully extended, you're not hurting yourself, and you're protecting your fall or yourself within that fall. Now, that's not something that you can comfortably do at the beginning, but you almost have to force yourself or put the student in that uncomfortable situation. And eventually, as their body kind of gets used to, their brain starts realizing, okay, this isn't so bad, this isn't so scary. Now I can start thinking about, okay, how can I make it more effective? How can I do it better? What are the little things as an instructor that we can give to these students to say, okay, try this, try that, focus on this idea, focus on this concept, because the physicality of each student is going to be different. If everybody was super athletic, I'm sure it would be a bit easier, but students come in different sizes, shapes, ages, injuries, different things that could prevent them from being able to perform these things. So how do we keep the students in an uncomfortable place where they're forced to move and do the things before they even understand exactly what's going on? Not for the sake of just giving them something new so they can broaden the understanding of everything that they already have at that point. Essentially creating an environment that they're unfamiliar with, where all of a sudden they have to pull back all the previous lessons that they had prior, so then they can start utilizing them there. So the brain finally clicks in and says, oh, this will keep me safe. This is where I would pass. This is where I would use a hook. Oh, I would push away here so I can strike, because this other person's coming. Oh, I'm going to push in this direction so I can strike him and keep them between me and the other person. And that's what happened with this particular student. At first, very uncomfortable, very skittish, was put between two attackers and essentially stayed there and got bombarded with attacks, got hit. And we weren't going full bore. We used padded sticks. The point wasn't to put this great dynamic of adrenaline in them, but just enough uncomfortable feeling where they had to freak out. And within that freak out, they were able to calm down, realize what lessons and the things that were being said resonated the most and made the most sense for that situation. And by the end of class, folks, she was pushing one of the opponents in between the other. She was hitting them in the legs to stop them from moving, hitting them in the back of the head, even moving around and keeping the other person away until they were ready to engage and attack. And that was the basics of that particular exercise, was how do you utilize everything that you've learned up until this point in a situation where you're unfamiliar with. And we've discussed, or maybe we haven't really gone too deep into it, but I know that there are a lot of martial artists that talk about pressure testing, these dynamic trainings where you put on pads, you put on helmets, and you kind of go as close to full as you possibly can to kind of get that adrenaline running, to get that sense of, hey, you know what, somebody striking really fast, you can't really catch the hand, so what do you have to do? Oh, you have to jam them up, you have to strike hard enough for them to pull back and hurt. But when you start using pads, you get that feeling that's removed. You no longer have that reaction of pain, and oftentimes, or more often than not, in a real situation, you're not going to have padding. You're not going to have something to protect you. You're not going to have a helmet. So that training is great. Don't get me wrong. I love doing it too. I love putting a helmet and just banging away. It's a great stress reliever. It definitely is. And you definitely push yourself to try to figure out ideas that you thought were great when you learned them, but you come to realize that in that situation, it wasn't as useful, at least not the way that it was taught. So something had to change, and that's where that learning happens. But the idea here is, do you necessarily have to go to that degree? Is there ways to put somebody in an uncomfortable situation where they have the same response, where they have that adrenaline, where they have that fear, where they have that hesitation, but it isn't anywhere near as scary? Now, a good friend, Marty Lee, he pointed something out when he was demonstrating what he does. This was maybe last year. And he made me panic. And all he did was he started moving his feet up and down really fast. It looked silly when you saw it from an outside perspective, but when you're trying to work on drawing your knife and pulling it out after doing a certain move, that gave me enough of a jolt to freak out, and it became that much harder. So there are definitely ways that we can manipulate the mind to feel a certain way without necessarily having to go that far where there's bruising afterwards, or where you have to wear safety equipment to get there, because essentially that's what we're doing. We're feeding the brain information so it can understand, so it can take that information from a learned process and it becomes an instinctive, intuitive, and a reflexive response. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do. We're trying to get the art to become something that just comes out, that just happens. You can't plan an attack. The guy isn't going to tell you, I'm going to throw a right and a left, and then I'm going to throw a roundhouse. They're not. They're just going to attack you. How you respond, how quickly you can gain that control is going to make a huge difference in, well, how badly hurt or how safe you remain in that situation. And that's what we're focused on, and what we train in IPC is really real life situations, and trying to maintain that mental focus, that calm, so we make better choices. And what better choice can we make than to teach our students to make good choices instinctively? And that's what we kind of came up with in this process, was how do you put the brain in an uncomfortable situation so it can then pick up on all the things that it needs to, and it is forced to pick up on all the things that it needs to, and start putting together these ideas. They were just basic angles. That's it. Well, then you start hitting a bag, so you feel that sense of the pressure and the contact and the impact. Then you start doing it with a moving target. Then you start doing it with live sticks, because now you have a good control. That already amps up the adrenaline, because when you have a stick flying close to your face, it will jar you. But can you stand firm? Can you keep yourself calm enough to keep the fight going, where your first response isn't to run away, but to create space? It isn't to move away from the attack, but move into a place where you're safer away from the attack, but still close enough to do all the things that you need to accomplish. That's not an easy task. I've been doing this for 9 years, and it's still scary to do from time to time. But if we can understand the idea that choice will ultimately be safer than trying to get away, which is counterintuitive to most people. Something's coming at you, you want to block, you want to make yourself a smaller target, you want to avoid it altogether. But in a fight, you don't always have that opportunity. You don't always have that chance. And you may have to use violence to get out of it. It's not what we want to do, and ultimately it's not where we want to go, but it is what we train for. So how do we get the thing that is most important, which is the brain, to understand that? And we discovered that it's really putting people in that discomfort. And it doesn't necessarily have to be super dramatic. It doesn't have to be, full bore contact. But if we think about it, and if we take into consideration the ideas of knowing the student, the lesson, and yourself, well, remember when you were uncomfortable. When were you last nervous learning something? What made you nervous? Do you see the same thing in your students? Do you see why they flinch, why they pull back, why they don't attack the way they're supposed to be attacking in that situation? And then, can you augment the lesson so it can bring out those things, so it can create that environment for them where they are going to mess up? In other words, you want them to fail within training, so you can guide them and find out what it is they failed in, so then you can feed them the information that they need so they can succeed in a real or as real of environment as possible. Because the day that they need it, you're not going to be there most likely. You won't be there to give them guidance. You won't be there to give them anything, really. They'll just have to rely on what they trained, on what they understood more than anything. And that's what's going to come out the most. What's up here? Because that's what they're going to train. That's what they're going to remember. Now, that's just, again, my personal take on it. I'm sure there are other ways that we can get the student to truly understand the essence and the ideas and concepts that we teach in the martial arts, because as those who have been doing it for decades understand that a lot of what they did or they can't do anymore, but they're still capable of a lot. And why is that? Well, they understand something that maybe wasn't there at the beginning, that took experience to fully understand and get and become a part of themselves in the way that they think. So that's where we're going with that. Thank you very much for joining me on another one of Nain's shorts. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. We are raffling this beautiful blade off. This is the last week. Buy your tickets, $5 Zelle, or we also take Venmo. So reach out, we'll figure out how to do that, and hopefully you can win the blade. Now, before I go, the 30th of September, the OKO training, it's going to be in Pleasanton. Look out for that. Please join us. It's a wonderful event. It's the 15th year that they're doing this. So it's definitely a momentous occasion, and you definitely want to be a part of it. So keep an eye out for that. Thank you very much. Till the next one. 3, 2, 1, cut!